Hello and welcome to the Claret and Blue podcast. It's Wednesday, 8 a.m. as we record this. Kendrick, you awake?
I'm a little bit dizzy, actually. It's I need to have me full English and me porridge and me continental breakfast to get me going. I've not had so much as a glass of water.
Well, we thought today might be the return of Claret and Brew, so I've got a coffee with me. But John is in Istanbul and is off to the presser. It's 3 hours ahead in Turkey, so the times didn't line up. I did a show yesterday on my own. Poor me, talking about Kamara. Poor us. Do you want to give your take on that news yesterday? Can we get some misery in the first few minutes of this?
I thought you were going to ask me to review your show then. Your
don't do that.
20-minute monologue or whatever.
No one needs to do that.
It's just frustrating, isn't it? I saw somebody on social media last night said, yes, obviously, when it's us competing against the big boys, it can be a squad depth issue. But this isn't really. This is a bad luck issue for me rather than a squad depth issue. Because as the tweeter was pointing out, that we're pretty well stocked generally in the centre of that park. You think we've got Tielemans, Onana, Kamara, McGinn, Barkley, and Bogart, but we've only now got two of them available. You know, you're not gonna stock up at the start of every season with twice that amount just in case injuries affect one department of your team. So I just think it's bad luck. All teams have to cope with injuries to key players throughout the course of a season. I do think, and this is not me trying to be a kind of woe is me Villa fan again, I do think that it's gone under the radar a little bit, the significance of that Kamara injury. You know, if Arsenal lost Declan Rice, for example, it would be back page news. Now, I'm not saying Kamara should be back page news, but I think people need to...
You can sort that out, can't you?
I could do, yeah. I'm not putting the paper to bed at 11 o'clock at night, having getting up at 8 o'clock for your to do podcast with you. It's a crushing blow. You know, I think if you did a straw poll of most Aston Villa fans, I don't know, probably best, most consistent, most influential player who, you know, we named our blooming player of the Man of the Match award in his honour, pretty much. That tells us how good and how reliable he is.
Got to re-record that now.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's the real blow.
First world problems, eh? So yeah, it's a massive blow. Most Villa fans would have said, you know, you'd have been asked which player would you rather get injured. You probably wouldn't have said any of them. Yeah. But you certainly wouldn't have said Boubacar Kamara. I think it just puts a lot of pressure and scrutiny on the comebacks of Ross Barkley, of Onana. I'm sure we'll speak a little bit more about McGinn shortly. I just feel for him as well because, you know, he's already had a bad one with us before a few years ago. And, you know, I don't know how highly rated he is in France, but you'd have thought he'd have had a chance playing in the top end, you know, in the Champions League race or the title race for Aston Villa. You thought he'd have had a chance with the World Cup on the horizon. That would now seem unlikely, I'd have thought. I don't think he's going to be able to, you know, recover in time to make that squad anymore. No. So it's just a massive blow all round, and it just comes at a time when we've lost a rare game at home. We've got McGinn out. We're all feeling a little bit sorry for ourselves. We don't know what's happening in the transfer market. It just feels like Villa have taken us from kind of delight to despair in a matter of a week or whatever. So, and again, without sounding like too much of a knobhead about it, got to kind of trust the process, haven't we? We got to trust the manager, trust the board, you know, trust the ability in the squad and the character of those who are going to step into the void to try and get us up and running again. But you know, in the cold light of day, it does feel like a real devastating blow for us.
The timeline around Onana was always kind of 2 to 3 weeks-ish. We should be approaching that now with the Newcastle game at the weekend. If Onana's not available for this one, which we'll obviously know at the back end of the week when Emery does all his press duties, that's every game is harder that the midfield is not available, as obvious as it sounds. There's so few options. it's interesting the point you raised. And I saw a few comments suggesting that Villa have left themselves short. They haven't. They've got 3 or 4 injuries at the same time in the same area. That is highly unlucky. Obviously, McGinn can play a little bit further forward as well. But to have Kamara, Onana, and McGinn injured for potentially a period of time at the same time is really irritating. That's not Villa's fault. It's not a lack of transfer business. If all those 3 were fit and we had another midfielder on top of those, that midfielder probably isn't playing very much. And we'd then be talking about what a waste it was to sign him because he's not getting in the team. So you can't stockpile 40 players in the event that 5 or 6 get injured at the same time. But that is what's happened, and Villa will have to do their best to navigate through that.
We've had this, and you can't blame people for how their bodies react, or whether they're on the end of challenges that are going to cause them damage. But we've got this, Barkley. Barkley's getting on. God, I wish I was getting on at that age. Barkley's getting on a bit in football terms, so he is going to creak. But Kamara and Onana tend to. You don't have both of them fit at the same time very often, do you? Really?
Yeah, I saw a stat of Kamara missing something like, if he does miss the whole season, he will have missed something like 60 games through injury in his 4 years at Villa, which is a very big percentage. So he's reliable in the sense that when he plays, he's very good, but he's not reliable for a full season. And he's never been that. He's played something like 50 or 60% of Villa's games available since his time joining. So for as much as we laud him as very, very good and very important to Villa, my counterpoint to that is Villa have been good themselves over the last couple of seasons because of what Emery has done, despite Kamara only being available for 50 or 60% of the games. So he's been available for, 25, 30 games this season and won't be available for the next 25-ish. Villa can still go on and achieve good things without him because we've done that in his time at Villa so far. He's not played every single minute up until now, and Villa's success is only due to Kamara because we have missed him for periods, as you say.
Yeah, I think that's the sliver of encouragement. Slither's the former midfielder, Fabian Delphin. Sliver of encouragement is that for somebody who is so important, so good, so consistent, so influential. We've coped with him before. We'll have to cope with him. We've coped with him. We've coped without him before. We'll have to cope without him again.
We'll come back to McGinn in a little bit. Let's do transfers because that's everybody's favourite topic during January. We'll start with Bailey returning, which we didn't touch on yesterday's podcast, but being recalled or due to be recalled from his spell at Roma. That was going to be a season-long loan. There wasn't a break clause in that, so Villa had to agree on terms to bring him back and presumably pay Roma some money or forego some money that Roma were going to pay Villa. Why is that, do you think? It just was so desperate for options.
The McGinn situation has probably compounded that in the sense that, yes, we know that we liked in the centre of the park, but I know Guessand's come back from AFCON duty, but if you think who can play, who's tended to play off that right side, it's tended to be McGinn, Guessand, Sanchez,
Carlos Sanchez.
Too early for me, mate, honestly. Sancho, Marlon, a little bit at times. Yeah. So it kind of leaves us light there. And, I don't know that the wranglings that Villa will have had to done with Roma to get him back. But that is probably going to be less fraught and less expensive than bringing another, right-sided deputy. Right-side attacking deputy from another club. So I'm all for it. I'm probably in the minority of Villa fans. I put something on socials a couple of weeks ago saying I'd have him back. Now. There's people in the comments saying, "No, Matt, you're misremembering. He's had one good season in 4, etc., etc." And I think this is probably me being a bit unkind to Guessand, but I tweeted last night that I Facebooked last night because I'm still old enough to be on there, saying if you've got the ball in the attacking area and you want a player to commit a fullback and get a cross over or cut the ball back, I still think that Leon Bailey, maybe he'll do it 3 times out of 10 rather than 10 times out of 10. I think he's got a better chance of doing that than Evan Guessand. Now, the flip side of that is if you want a right-sided midfielder stroke winger to come back, track back and provide protection for Matty Cash, then Evan Guessand is your better bet than Leon Bailey. But having both options in the squad can't hurt. basically. So
yeah,
I would definitely. I'd like to see him given a go, and it depends on Bailey, doesn't it? It depends which version of Bailey we do get. Does he feel like, oh, you want me now? Tough. I'm going to down tools. I don't think he'd do that. But does he feel like, oh, right now, this is an opportunity to show that I should have been involved all along? And
yeah, hopefully that.
So we see a version of that.
I wasn't Bailey's biggest fan last year. I'm more of the mindset of, he had one brilliant season, very, very good in 2024, but the rest of them pretty uneventful, to the point that he gets loaned out. Emery clearly doesn't want him at that stage. We're now come crawling back saying, hello, can you please come and help us, because the options we have there are so limited. And maybe part of that is because they know McGinn's going to be unavailable for a longer period of time as well. Or just we need a right winger, and like you say, getting a loanee from somebody else or buying somebody is going to be more expensive than Bailey. Bailey knows the system, knows what Emery wants. It should be a pretty smooth transition to get him back in the squad. The only thing I will kind of try and hang my hat on, is that Buendia was deemed not part of this squad under Emery for a couple of seasons or a couple of transfer windows, and happy to get rid of him. And then he gets his second chance and comes in and takes it. Now, I don't think Buendia's a world beater. I think he's been good this season and has been a useful addition. If Bailey can do the same, be unavailable, and then all of a sudden come back and be, oh, actually, we hung on at the back end of 2026 for, just scraping over the line in the Champions League, or however it unfolds, and Bailey was a big part of that, fair play to him, then it's job done, isn't it? It doesn't matter what that looks like if he contributes.
Yeah, then all we need then is for Danny Ings to come instead of Tammy Abraham and see if everybody can get a tune over him, and then we've got the Holy Trinity back and forward.
Yeah. Talk about Tammy as you bring him up. One of the transfer links that doesn't seem to be going away. Sort of a few lines about Villa's chiefs flying over to Istanbul to hold talks. It's like, we are playing in Istanbul as well a couple of days afterwards, which might be a bit convenient. It seems to not be going away, this story. We've spoken about Tammy a little bit on the pod with you.
I don't think me and you have. I mean, it's just made me laugh then that, imagine if we're so tight against PSR that the only reason they're going after Tammy Abraham is because they're already in Istanbul.
I thought no, the only reason they've flown over early isn't for talks with Tammy, it's just the flights are just cheaper.
We need somebody. We've not had anybody since Duran. Duran? I've lost track.
Duran?
Duran. We've not had anybody who can, I don't know, support or challenge Watkins as a proper number 9 since he left a year ago. Obviously, we're going to be reminded of him in the next couple of days. So I think we definitely need somebody in that role, so that when Watkins is creaking after an hour or 70 minutes or whatever, or falls out of form, then we've got an option that we can bring in somebody who can lead the line. I think with Tammy Abraham, it's interesting because obviously there's a load of goodwill towards Tammy Abraham because his goals were one of the reasons that we got back into the Premier League in the first place. Prolific at Villa, albeit at Championship level. I thought that his career would kick on more than it had in the intervening what years, 7 years or whatever. Years, yeah. And despite a little spell at Chelsea, he hasn't really done it in the Premier League. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not a good player, because he's chosen to play abroad and done relatively well, I think. But again, it's one of those ones where if he was at the very top of his game and one of the best strikers in Europe, Aston Villa probably wouldn't be able to try and put together a deal for him in January, midway through the season. So, got good potential there. A player who... That's like peak Aston Villa signing under Emery, though, isn't it, on paper? A player that's at a decent age isn't, held up in the headlines of he's one of the... Nobody's talking about Tammy Abraham for the England squad, for example. He's not that level because of the career that he's had over... Not yet, mate.
Not yet. Exactly. But that gives a little bit of a kind of twinge of excitement of, well, what can he become? He's younger than Ollie Watkins. He's an actual striker. He has scored goals in his career before. He's obviously didn't score loads at Milan, but had a decent record at Roma. Finds himself at Besiktas, and then you think, well, there's a kind of career to be rekindled a little bit, and that feels, I'm sure Emery's eyes light up at the opportunity of what that is. Now, from our perspective, I think we can all talk about, and anyone who remembers Villa getting promoted, the rosy times of, Tammy Abraham, the Luke Roper kit, it just feels like good memories. But if Unai Emery and his scouts and whoever is involved with transfers at Villa want him, they're not sitting there dewy-eyed over the good old days. They want him because they think he's a good footballer for the squad available. I've said this before, if we were still with Dean Smith or Steven Gerrard or a lesser manager, they might play on that. Well, he's already a fan favourite at Villa. Like, can I kind of get something out of him and almost play off vibes? Emery won't be doing that. He will want him because he thinks he's a good fit for the system. So that excites me.
I like the fact that, I'm going back down there. We're so skint at the moment that that they can only look at like scouting documents from.
I found a cabinet from 2018.
Years ago.
Anything in here?
I found like a DVD of the 2018-19 season and thought, crikey, someone sent in the show reel.
What's Robert Snodgrass up to? We could do the right winger.
How good's this kid? I think the Emery factor, again, most things come back to the Emery factor at Aston Villa any time in the last 3 or 4 years, because we trust him to work his magic, and that hasn't quite worked on Sancho. The Harvey Elliott thing didn't work out, but things won't. Not every deal will work out.
No.
What we need to happen, and this is a massive leap of faith, is the window that we had last January. That didn't quite get us there in the end.
No.
As brilliant as
got us into Europe, which we probably wouldn't have done without them at all.
Yeah, as brilliant as Rashford and Asensio were, we fell short. But I think you've got to say that was a successful window.
Yeah. I don't think we'd have got into Europe at all without those two. So we fell short in terms of the Champions League, but we still got to the Europa League, which is still an achievement. It will be the same this year. Whoever it is, whether it's Tammy or somebody else, whatever replacement they bring in for Marlon, who had scored goals this season and was relatively effective off the bench, whoever that player is, they also need to do the same.
Yeah, and I think of the options out there, and I'm probably going to talk about another one for centre forward, but I think Abraham's definitely worth a punt, really. See what Emery can get out of him.
We'll talk about the other one then, linked. JP Mateta, with potentially everyone Guessand going the other way. I said yesterday with John, or Monday, that it feels like a decent fit, but I'm a little bit sceptical.
The one tactic is, if you get rid of all of Palace's best players, we've got more chance of beating them. We don't play against till next season.
Do we play to somebody like Mateta's strengths? We're not firing balls into the box, are we? And kind of trying to win aerial duels. That's not Villa's game.
No, but I think there's more to him than that as well. If you think when we've had them at full flow against us, I know Eze's gone. Can we sign Sarr as well just to stop him scoring against us? But them in full flow on the counter attack. Mateta's pretty rapid still for a big man. That's a cliche. We don't necessarily play to a big, strong, imposing striker. But does that mean, don't we play because we haven't got that?
Well, yeah, arguably, yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes, probably more than I've seen under previous kind of incarnations of Emery's Aston Villa, we have tended to go long more. Whether that's people getting wise to us or pressing us a little bit more aggressively. There's been lots of times when, whether it's Watkins, Morgan Rogers, have had to go and compete and battle for those big aerial balls. So I'm not saying if we did sign him that Emery would suddenly turn into, Wimbledon 1988 crazy gang long ball merchants. But I think Mateta's a good enough footballer. You can't be a good centre forward in the Premier League nowadays if you're just kind of all elbows. And I think
it's doing him a discredit.
All-round game as well.
Palace just feel like they're crumbling, I suppose, with Gahey going and Glasner and then Mateta. If two of those leave in January, that makes Palace's season so much more difficult. We'll talk about the Guessand thing in a second, but the Palace side of it seems to be, from what I've seen on social media, which is not the greatest barometer, very, very good last year, pants this year, and don't really mind if he leaves. That worries me a little bit, but then we've heard that with other players where they're not wanted at their club and they come to Villa and they're absolutely fine. And it's hard to be pro-Tammy, anti-Mateta, when in the Premier League, Mateta's got a good record of scoring goals in the league. He scored 7 or 8 this season, off the top of my head. He's still contributing to Palace, even if he's not playing particularly well. I'll fact check that in a sec. We need options. We need somebody. Mateta, Tammy, whoever it is, Villa need a forward who's going to come in and score a handful of goals and help them towards their goals for the season. If we can work a deal with Palace, I'd be all for it, but it doesn't come without risk. But then every transfer is the same, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be connoisseurs of European football who know a lot more than me about the kind of unpolished gems that are out there that we could take chances on. Of those two options in terms of Abraham and Mateta, if we signed either of them, I don't think we'll sign both of them. If we signed either of them, I wouldn't be too displeased. I'd think there's potential there. I'd be encouraged. Now, obviously, I'm a Villa fan, so if they don't hit the ground running after the first game, I'd probably be writing them off forevermore. But I think either of them. I know it's a bit of a cop out, but I think either of them would make our squad better at the moment.
He has 8 goals in 22 appearances in the league, Mateta, this season, which is a very decent return. The Guessand side of things is a complete curveball from my point of view. Obviously, Guessand was linked to Palace in the summer before he joined Villa, so clearly the club have interest in him. Now, whether there's anything in this specific deal and whether this is just 2 and 2 equals 5, and they were linked with Guessand before, so that's an easy link to throw out there again. Villa need a striker. That would be bizarre. I'm sure what would happen if this was to happen is Palace fans are okay to lose Mateta. He comes to Villa and he's actually not as good as people think he is. And it was a one-season wonder kind of vibe. And Guessand, who we all think is rubbish, goes to Palace, plays up front for them, and he's brilliant, right? That's what we all think will happen. And the next time we play Palace, Guessand scores. That's how the narrative unfolds. As a straight kind of on-paper transaction, to lose Guessand in January and forget the money side of it for now, to spend 30 million in the summer and then loan him in January or sell him in January is mental. Shouldn't happen in the first place. But if that's the out and Mateta's the in, I think every Villa fan listening to this says that's a good deal.
The Guessand thing has been so strange. You know, you spoke my fears there that they go and play him up front and he'd score 15 goals.
I think that's what will happen.
Back end of the season.
Well, I don't think he'll score 15 goals, but I think he'll play up front for him, which I think is probably his better position.
Well, he's been such a strange signing. They might stick him at centre half and he might replace Mark Gay and he might become...
play for Liverpool in 2 years' time.
If that was the swap deal or part of the swap deal, you take your chances on it, because as long as the one who came our way made an impact, I wouldn't begrudge Evan Guessand, except against Aston Villa, going and making a success there, because there's certainly the appetite and the hunger there. I'd find it a strange admission. Is failure too strong a word? Probably not. I'd find it a strange admission of failure from Aston Villa's point that they would effectively write off. It's not the biggest money signing, but it's still a decent
the biggest one of the summer. Yeah,
it's a decent sum of cash. I find
I think you can dress that up either way you want. You can either look at it as a positive of we've recognised it's a mistake and we're trying to actively deal with that mistake rather than sit on it for the next 3 years, or you could admit that Villa aren't run very well and this is not the first time this has happened. Diaby, Marlon, and Philogene to a lesser extent, but include him in that and Guessand as players that come in and then leave pretty swiftly after. I'd rather deal with it now than sit on him and hope that he turns into something good. I like the idea of giving players patience, but we're operating at such a top level that if you're not cutting it under this manager and he's seen enough of you in 6 months to say that you're not good enough, wash your hands of it then. Get on with it. Get him out. Get someone else in.
Yeah, I don't think Villa would hang on to a player just out of sheer stubbornness and pride. We signed him, we saw something, we're going to make him good. And, he's like 57 years old and still haven't cracked it. I do see it. Maybe this is me clutching for positives in the situation. I do see it. And you've mentioned Diaby, Marlon. Who was the other one that you said? Who had moved on quite quickly?
Philogene, different, but...
Yeah, I'd argue that Diaby and Marlon made a greater contribution than Guessand.
Oh, easy. Yeah.
Anyway, but I see it as being quite agile and quite alive to the fact that this is a fast-paced environment where you've got to be open to, marginal gains. It might be that you lose Evan Guessand and you only get 10% of an upgrade from what you bring in, but that 10% could be 3 points. It could be a cup win. So I'm whatever they decide, we'll go with. Whether it works, we'll have a good moan or a cheer about the end of May.
That's all the transfer bits and pieces for this episode as of 8:30 on Wednesday morning. If things change and progress, obviously we'll be back to talk about them. Let's speculate around McGinn a little bit. I don't want to do this for more than a couple of minutes because I think it's unfair. And again, things change. News might break later today that he's out for 3 months and we'll probably have to do something else again. To have Onana injured and Kamara injured is bad enough. To have McGinn injured is a completely different thing in terms of energy and work rate and the captain and what he brings to the team. I think you can't get elsewhere. And I said on the show I did yesterday, if Villa could spend what they wanted, and Conor Gallagher is here now and could step in to replace McGinn, you can't get much more like for like than that. And we'd go, okay, McGinn's out, big blow, but Gallagher's a good player. We'll be okay. Now, if he's only out for a couple of weeks, bit annoying, but absolutely fine. If his is also a serious one of 6 weeks plus, 8 weeks plus, that's going to be a huge blow to be able to cover, isn't it?
Previously, I'd have thought losing McGinn you'd have lost the leader. You'd have lost that influence who, when things were a bit flat, could have got the team going. I do think we've probably got enough characters still within the team who can do that now. I think, listen, Rodgers is not a leader in terms of like captain material, certainly not yet anyway, maybe later in his career, but he can bring energy into the team.
Yeah, take the game by the scruff of his neck.
Yeah, I think you've got Tielemans, who's a kind of, I was going to say wily old, but he's not particularly old, is he? But he's experienced. And I think he can help to dictate and set the tone of the game and set the pace of the game. You've got different things, but you've got captains in there. You've got Ezri Konsa, who's, fairly leads by example rather than screams and shouts and stuff. But so I think in terms of the mentality of the squad, I've only pulled out 3 players there, but there's a good core group around him. You've got Mings, who's back fit again, not necessarily he's going to be on the pitch immediately, although he might be on Thursday night, so that's quite quick. Yeah. So I think in terms of the mentality and the spirit, I think we've got enough within our ranks. I think it comes down to the actual options on the pitch as well now. I think we spoke about that right-hand side in relation to Bailey coming back, and we spoke about how light we are in the centre of the park. Now, what can't happen, it absolutely can't happen, is, I'm probably going to jinx it now, is for us to have another injury in the middle of the park, because who are our last men standing at the moment? Tielemans and Bogart.
Yeah, and Hemmings.
Yeah, I mean, Hemmings looked good the other day, but it's a big ask for a kid to just step into a Champions League stroke outside title push.
A Tielemans injury now. Look,
don't.
No. I'm not going to give this more airtime than about 10 seconds. People that are like, season's over now. Well, we'll be lucky to finish 7th. I don't agree with that at all. There's still loads of points to play for. We are used to playing without Kamara. As we said before, we've played 50% of our games since he's been here without him. And we've been pretty good in the last 3 years. So it's not all on him. But if you were to get one more, like a Watkins or a Tielemans or a Konsa, that is then on the border of, okay, this could be a struggle now to go and achieve something this season, because that is probably one too many.
I think you lose either of those. I think you lose Tielemans or Bogard, whether that's injury or suspension. You all of a sudden, what's the phrase? Round pegs in square holes. You then might be playing Lindelof.
Play midfield, yeah.
The holding midfielder. I don't think he'd be the worst in there, but you know what I mean? It's properly creaking then. So, which just shows, if we're talking about, and I'm putting words in your mouth, this is my word, not yours. If we're talking about being one injury away from a catastrophe or a disaster or whatever, which you didn't say, but I'm a newspaper man.
Employed, yeah.
Can't whip these things up. Of course, we need reinforcements.
Yeah, and potentially this is all for no reason, because we will hear in the presser later today or the back end of the week that McGinn's back in 2 weeks, and that's fine. Or Nana's back this weekend, and that's fine. To have options, and for those options to stay fit for the rest of the season and to step up a gear in Kamara's absence is what we need, and we will wait to see if that's possible.
Can I just have one quick mention of some of the, I don't know, circus hype and nonsense that I think is, it's a typical moan from me, but the external factors around Aston Villa at the moment, some people we spoke a little bit about Emery's post-match interview when we did the post-match show after the Everton game. People, in my mind, trying to look into to find problems that aren't there.
Yeah.
So Emery, post-match, was annoyed because we'd lost a game at Fortress Villa Park, and that doesn't happen very often. He'd lost his captain, and he would have had an idea how severe that injury was even then. I know tests and scans and things have to happen. He lost his captain, that compounded the fact that he'd lost key midfielder the week before.
Yeah.
We've said before, when he says we're not contenders, like I said on social media last night, if he was in the boat race or if he was playing solitaire on his own, he'd say we're not contenders. That's just what he does. And I just think people have said, "Oh, is Emery unhappy? Is he going to leave? Is this the end of it?" Now Villa's title race has collapsed, and you're thinking, well, a week ago you're saying we weren't good enough to be in a title race. We've lost one game, 2 games in 15 or whatever it is, and it's lazy journalism for me. It's people, and
Agreed.
We are going to devote more time to scrutinise every last bit of Aston Villa because A, it's our passion, and B, it's our job. But commentators who only come along to rubberneck when things aren't, when there's setbacks. Okay, if you get your joy out of that's fine, but be aware of the bigger picture. And it's just frustrated me, and it's probably I saw something on YouTube, and it was Jim White who was stirring the pot, and it annoys me first of all because he always says Emery, so that's one correction. But Simon Jordan was the voice of reason, saying, "Well,
wow,
hang on a minute, look what Villa have achieved, look what Villa have done. Of course, Emery, he's got these really, really high, sky-high standards. Of course, he's going to be annoyed. So it's just wound me up a little bit, really. Which basically what I'm saying is stick with Claret and Blue for all your Aston Villa news and opinions, and we'll tell it how it is.
Background change for those watching. We're going to talk about the Europa League quickly. You mentioned before about maybe Tyrone Mings will be back on the pitch sooner than we think on Thursday night. Is he in the squad? I can't remember. I keep getting mixed up in my head. Did he drop out for Barkley or did Barkley drop out for Mings? Yeah, so November, John tweeted, Ross Barkley has now been included in Villa's Europa League squad to replace Tyrone Mings taken out due to injury. So I know you can re-register the squad in terms of new additions in, I think it's the start of February to account for the January window, and it's 3 new players in, the same as it was for the Champions League. So Villa signed Tammy, Mateta, Bailey would have to be registered technically as well. He's a new player. Which way around was it again? I keep getting myself confused now. Mings would have been in the Europa League squad to start the season, got injured, and then Barkley came in to replace him. Now, I think that's Barkley until January. So if you wanted to re-register Mings in the February one as well, that would be one of your 3. So it's all very complicated. So I don't think Mings is in the Europa League squad for Fenerbahce. Now, there's a presser later today, and the team sheet will be out a few hours before the game, and he might play. Who knows? This call will be completely wrong. But I just wanted to ask as a broader point, how serious would you be taking this game?
Well, first of all, I'd say go to anywhere except Claret and Blue for all your up-to-date, accurate details about Villa's Europa League squad. It's weird because if you'd have probably asked me this 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'd have said, "Oh yeah, go full pelt and maintain the momentum, give yourself the best possible chance of getting those wins on the board, etc., etc." And then I see Kamara injured like 6 minutes or whatever it was into the FA Cup game, and thinking, could we have? It's amazing what you can do with hindsight, but.
You don't want to go full pelt for this and Tielemans gets injured. Players like that are so crucial should not be playing this game, in my opinion. I don't want to see Konsa, Tielemans or Watkins play this one.
I suppose
Watkins probably has to. There's no one else.
That's going to say, I'll put the question back at you then. Who plays? That's the problem at the moment. Our first 11, yes, you'd want to wrap them up in cotton wool because you're going to need them to go back to the well every week, twice a week or whatever. But beneath the first 11, there's probably only about 3 or 4.
Yeah,
3 or 4 players now.
As I've said it, I've kind of unwounded my own logic.
The ultimate aim is to finish in the Champions League, and I'm not sure football works in such a precise way as this. But what's the path of least resistance to get into the Champions League? Is it winning?
I think it's top 4 when you've got such a points gap available. So the theory is, well, you could probably get away with losing the odd game in the league then, but we could beat Fenerbahce and still not finish in the top 2. So kind of what's the point? What's the point of risking your squad for a Premier League game is my point. But there's so few options that we're going to have to risk a couple of them because otherwise we're not going to play with anybody up front.
What I'm hoping that this podcast is quickly obsolete because Emery speaks to John and the assembled press pack in Turkey, and he says, "Oh, don't worry, John McGinn. It was only a little boo-boo on his leg. We put a plaster on it, and he's fine. And guess what? That's encouraged Ross Barkley, Anana, etc., and they're fit as well. And I've got some transfer news for you. Blah, 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 blah. Even
That doesn't
one
sound
piece-
like an Emery presser.
No, probably. Yeah, John McGinn is not a contender.
Right, that'll do for this one. Kendrick, thank you very much for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow night for the post-match show, and hopefully we're talking about a positive result, a positive day for news, and
We'll
positive...
have known whether Tyrone Mings will have played by then as well, won't we?
Well, hopefully, yeah. Hopefully we'll have our eye on the ball. Score prediction, very quickly.
1-1.
1-1. Durant score.
Yeah, for us.
Right, that'll do. Thank you very much for watching or listening to this episode of the Claret podcast, and we'll see you Thursday night. Bye.